Welcome, Ryan. This is the first podcast that we're going to try on the channel, and I want to learn a little bit about Fire Rover. So tell me about Fire Rover and what kind of problems you guys solve that the rest of the fire protection world doesn't solve.
Yeah, it's funny. I appreciate you bringing me on as the first podcast. That's always fun. I like it to be a series of first. But yeah, what we're doing with Fire Rover is we are trying to change the way the world fights fires. So, with anything else, if you look at from how do you bring innovation into fire protection, and I work with a lot of fire protection companies that are trying to innovate. And usually, the problem that I've seen is that you're an entrepreneur, you have a big hurdle, right? Your hurdle is getting into the lab and basically proving to UL or FM that your system is innovative, right? So really, it basically plays to the big guys. And these guys have a ton of money and they prove a lot of things in labs, right? Or in warehouses or that type of thing. So what we were lucky that we were able to prove ourselves in the waste and recycling industry, which is an unregulated industry in the US and Canada. So we now have 850 facilities across the three continents. And we started 10 years ago with zero. And for us, it was nice because when we went to FM, even though it took 8 years, it we had already proven that the solution had worked in the real world. So proving it in the lab wasn't as difficult because we were already doing everything. And honestly, like FM is amazing, right? It allows you to go through and track and look at every single thing that you would never even think of in a million years. What if this happens? What if this happens? They test literally everything. I can sleep at night before we had FM, but I obviously after FM, it also makes me feel good too, right? It's an amazing thing.
So, what is the core of Fire Rover? Tell us about what it is and how it works.
So Fire Rover, if you break it down, right, there's early detection. And so what we do is we use FLIR camera only, and we actually have two versions that we use. We've been using for 10 years with them. But the way that I try to explain it is that it's like if you're a car guy and you buy a Mustang, and then, you basically get the Shelby kit, and then you build that kit around it. So you end up having an amazing Mustang that's one of a kind and custom. For us, we do the same thing, right? When we're working with FLIR, we're basically doing workarounds for them to develop towards, right? So when you're buying that FLIR camera, you're actually buying it's not a Fire Rover version, but the reality is that you can only get it if you're working with us. And then we have our optical flame detectors, which are, they're FIKE. And then we also have smoke versus steam analytics. And so again, we use all of those tools. We use AI, we use all the different things that you would use from a masking perspective. And then what's different with us, and one of the reason we were able to get FM certified was because we have human beings who actually look at, verify, and confirm or result in an action when they're going to fight a fire. The reality is that we're doing early detection, looking at every piece of hay in a haystack to find the needle, and then we're dealing with that needle. So like last year, we confirmed 2,910 hotspots or fires at our facilities, at our customers' facilities. At the time, it was probably about 600 facilities. We put out 268 fires. We called the fire department 358 times, right? Because we have thermal only systems as well. So you got to think it's like when you're bringing in Fire Rover, we're the world's best integrator. But what we do is we're one throat to choke, right? So we are the early detection, all the K cameras, all the monitors, everything. Then we do the fire panels. Then we handle the contact. So all the different things that you do in those initial 10 minutes when a fire starts and when you get the fire professionals on site and get them activated. And so you throw all that together, and then we do full maintenance, full monitoring, bumper to bumper warranty for the life of the contract. So if something goes wrong, we have a heartbeat with the system. We'll send someone out next business day and have it fixed. And then the warranty's covered for that FLIR camera and the FIKE analytics and then our fire panel and all the other stuff. So it's really a one throat to choke model. So more of a solution than it is like a specific product, if that makes sense.
Sure. So, for our viewers out there who aren't really familiar with Fire Rover, and I am because I've seen you through these 10 years and admired your technology,
Yeah, I
that,
appreciate it.
what happens after the fire is detected? And talk a little bit about how it's monitored by humans. Where are they? And is it 24/7, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we're in the US. I mean, we have a number of different facilities. Again, 3 to 5, right? Because you always have to have enough butts and seats. And the reality is that our folks are highly trained. They're trained through from an FM approval, like they've gone through, but we're also a UL certified 5 diamond facilities, right? So we take that, we call it a virtual firefighter, but we take that role extremely seriously. And like we train, we practice, we do all the different things that you would do. And then also we've learned a lot of fire, like learned a lot of things about fighting fires in our We have 268 fires last year. This year, we're on pace to put out over 400 fires. We've had just in the last 2 months, we've had more 5+ event days than we had ever had in our entire history. Again, why is this happening? Because we're in a lot of waste and recycling facilities. So that's a whole different inherent risk of a problem. And we are doing chemicals, we're doing other things. But as you can imagine, first 5 years, we were proving that the system even worked. And we had some really good early adapters, USA Hauling, Recommunity, Reworld at the time was Cobanta. We really had good supporters who wanted it to work. So we worked with them. Then the second 5 years was like, okay, this works. Let's scale it. And then now and let's get approval. So that FM approval has been, when I get phone calls now, half the phone calls are like, how do you get a fire product through FM? And I'm like, that's not what I'm selling. Like, we're selling the way that you replace, like using a smart monitor to fight an atrium fire or an industrial fire or any sort of, we're really good in line of sight spaces. So any outdoors, we replace water towers. And then we've also created a bunch of different versions that all work off that same kind of platform. So I call it our skin, but we have a robot now that replaces hot work. So now you literally have in cutting and grinding, you have someone pull a Cushman up, and then we're literally watching it, and we can shoot 70 to 80 feet. So it covers more than any fire watch would do. So that's where the exciting stuff. Sorry to run on, but
Oh, no, that's
it's
great.
exciting.
It's making me think about the times that I've been in the chemical manufacturing plants, and we've seen them install their monitors too close to the hazard. And the fire brigade says, I don't want to climb up there and stand on that platform and then have a fireball come over and get me. So it sounds like a great solution, not just for waste to energy, but also for the chemical manufacturing space.
Yeah, and we actually did our first install of a chemical facility. And again, when I say that, we do a ton of hazard material. So we do a ton of chemicals, but we're protecting the recyclers and the environmental side of it. And that's where waste and recycling is such like it's kind of big catch-all, right? Because like we have rubber recycling and our system put out a fire in 4.5 minutes. We took a 3,000 degree fire and basically took it down to nothing. The fire department, it took them 10 minutes to get there after we were done shooting. And again, like that video is on our YouTube page as well. But there's been so many different things that we've learned over the years, and we've been subjected to. We haven't been in lumber, but we've been doing a ton of sawdust and so sawmill, sawdust, because it gets put into the solidification pits, right? So like we're dealing with a lot of these commodity hazards. We just haven't formally been able to go after them because we didn't have the approval that they required, right? If you call a chemical manufacturer, they're like, I want FM. When you're FM, give me a call. So hopefully we're at that point.
One of the things that got a lot of this started was the battery energy storage system modules, fires in those. And last summer, I was out at a few solar facilities in California, and they had so many fires that they had to give the fire department the keys to their facility. And because their operators were remote, they couldn't get to the solar plant fast enough for the firefighters to get in and do anything about the fires. And literally, the day that we were there walking around the plant, we walked upon some burnt out grass under some modules that they didn't even know had caught on fire. And
Yeah, it's insane. It really is insane. And again, like you're bringing up like stuff that a little bit, like, because we can replace a water tower, right? So just imagine, right, instead of having a water tower, whether you had a tank below it or not, wherever you had a manual ability to fight a fire, whether it was a fire professional or a fire brigade or whoever was going up there, it's a really easy thing to say. It's better for that person not to be there, right? Like it's better for you not to have to put that person up there. And we replace it with, so we can shoot depending on the nozzles, but 150 plus. So it's 300 feet by 150 feet. So we're covering a lot of paper storage. Like we'll do like a fire loop and then we'll have different units. And then we also have a self-contained unit that's not FM approved because of the continuous flow, but everything else is, right? So we're working on getting the box approved, but the first one was the continuous flow model, which basically turned it into a primary system as an alternative for sprinkler heads. And again, I have to say that all the time. We don't replace sprinkler systems. We actually are a sprinkler system. So like a lot of fire engineers, like they get nervous about our solution because the reality is if you walk into a building, you have 150,000 square feet, right? And you say, okay, 20% of that is going to be open air tip, right? For waste or recycling or something where it makes sense for us. 30% of it is going to be like office space or something, right? So that you're going to use standard sprinkler heads. It makes total sense. And then you might have conveyors or whatever, and that would use sprinkler heads. So you really only have us on 20% of your high hazard part of the business, but then you can have everything else. We just have a relationship with the customer where our piece of it is constantly monitored, constantly like it's basically our full solution.
Always thinking, or have you had any use at transformers for GSUs, generator step-up
So
transformers and power
it's
plants?
funny you say that. So 10 years ago, so there's a product called F500, and F500 did and again, they're an NFPA encapsulator agent. The reality is that they did a study with Con Ed of New York, and they basically proved that using their system on a energized or de-energized transformer, you actually could put the fire out. Where it was always seemed like, hey, once it starts, it's 15 to 25,000 gallons of mineral oil in these things, right? And they make a friggin' mess, right? But none of the utilities were really on board with it because they basically had said once they burn, it's what are we going to do? And it wasn't an environmental or a regulatory issue. The minute we get a regulator who says, hey, we're not going to have these things burn, then they would put a solution like ours in. But
Yeah,
I mean, I could, for 150 grand, I could literally put a self-contained box that will fog spray from 45 feet or more. So there's no flashback. And again, if worst case it happens, it's a rope, right? Like it's
right.
in another state. It's better to potentially try to put that fire out than deal with the million gallons of fire water you're going to need once you're trying to get this stuff done.
Yeah. You just jogged my memory. I worked with the hazard control technologies guys, and when I was at,
HCC.
yeah, they do the F500. I had them come up to our fire school when I was in Baltimore Gas and Electric, and it's amazing how much fire they'll put out. We had oil stoked steam lines that were very difficult to extinguish. We had a fire one day where they used 1,500 pounds of dry chemical on a little tiny fire because every time they'd hit it, it would go out. 2 seconds later, it would reflash. And until the oil burned off, it would just keep relighting. But
Yeah,
at
100%.
fire school, we found with the F500, we could make it to where it wouldn't relight. The smoke generation would go down 90%. And you could put a flare in that smoke and it wouldn't reignite. When I got to Dominion, I told them about it because we were putting in under turbine sprinkler systems and we were putting it in loading racks at propane storage facilities where we were rail car loading out, propane and natural gas liquids. We were sold on F500. They even did some tests there, but we never connected the Fire Rover to that. So we were always
Right.
trying to put it into these fancy sprinkler systems with all the heads.
Yeah, and
Uh,
inducted and proportionate, or they call it the diamond dozer. Hey, Mike Reiner, we're giving you a plug here.
Mike, yeah. Hey, I'm going to try and get him on the channel. That'll be pretty easy, really.
I'm sure it'd be really easy. And he's a good guy. And again, there's a lot of competition out there now, right? Like the wetting agents were new a decade ago, but like now because of NFPA and 18A, Mike got that through, which is actually really nice. And we use their product on as a default depending on what the installation is, because there's a lot of times that like we'll use just water or we'll use gels, right? We do waste to energy facilities and we're typically using gels to encapsulate the smoke if something goes wrong versus product like his was different, but it's amazing for MSW facilities, right? When you're really trying to maximize 1,000 gallons. And on average, we use 440 gallons per incident. So we're really using a significantly small amount of water. So we're looking for every safety belt and every safety feature we can possibly get. And our systems with unlimited water, again, FM actually won't allow an FM certified system to have a inductor of any product that's not water, right? They're just a water shop. We're always dealing with those politics.
Yeah, yeah, we had that same issue. That's why we did our own testing at Dominion before we built our system so that we were confident that they'd work. Um,
And
so,
they've done great in testing. And that's where if you go, I always tell everyone, I'm like, do F500 and whatever it is, and someone's burnt it.
yeah,
Someone did a
yeah.
test. It might have been in someone's backyard, but a test was done.
Honestly, what got us started, we had an auxiliary transformer explode at one of our power plants, and the oil gushed out of the back of it, splashed off the turbine building wall 80 feet in the direction from the pressure. So we had this 80-foot diameter pool fire burning in the corner, nice configuration of the
Mm.
turbine building. We had 55 firefighters show up from Chesterfield County, and they were all trained at fire school. Don't shut off the sprinklers. Don't shut off the sprinklers. And what they did was they floated that oil even further and they surrounded 3 more big transformers in the switchyard. They had deluge systems, and for the most part, those transformers survived. It was interesting to see where the lack of coverage of the water spray was. We burned up the control box because it was on the outside of the envelope of the water spray. But this fire got up into the fourth floor and into the roof of the building. They almost lost the entire turbine building because they wouldn't shut off the water and put a little foam on it. And that's what got us thinking we can't just put water. These were NFPA systems. They were approved by all the insurance companies and they failed. And we just got lucky we didn't lose the entire plant. So back in corporate, we started thinking about what can we do? Let's augment the water. And we went out and talked to the operators and they said they didn't like foam. It's too corrosive. They didn't like cold foam, environmental hazard. So that's when we found out about F500 and the fact that even when you run out of your concentrate, you can continue to spray water into it because the more agitation, the better. As opposed to if you run out of foam concentrate, if you keep spraying water on that, you break down your blanket and the
Oh,
fire
100%.
rekindles.
And that's where, again, we don't use a lot of foam. Like, it's up to our customers if they want to use it like a different type of wetting agent. But yeah, definitely, like wetting agents are by far the best, and they are one of the best. Can I ask a question? I know this is our first one, but am I allowed to share my screen? Do you
Think you
want to
can't
see video? Because I have a ton of video. If you want to, like everything I'm talking about, I have.
at the
There we go.
bottom? Go
Can
for it.
you see my screen? There we go.
Yes, I can.
All
Awesome.
right, and it'll be messy, but that makes sense.
So
But this is
firefighting
what I
is
was. What do you say? Yeah,
firefighting.
and again, I'm not doing this on purpose, but this is our on-watch system that we do for landfills, right? So it has our full solution. This is like the robot that I was telling you about that we built for cutting, grinding, and it is for small pile or small hazards. But basically, you pull up, you put your square around yourself where you're doing hot work, so the embers fly out. So we're still protecting the embers just to make sure that there is no fire that's starting outside of the work area. And then when they're finished, they basically put fire watch mode. So it meets OSHA standards. And this is what I was saying, like our fire water towers, honestly, the ones like we can literally do straight up, which is what we do a lot of these. And this is what I was telling you. We're protecting huge amounts of commodity in a lot of different places. The most fun everybody wants to see is this thing, right? Like what this is our system, and I'll walk you through one. This is a continuous flow system. We have unlimited water. And again, we're not saying that like we can fight the fire better than the fire department because we have no respect for the fire department. It's actually the opposite, right? Like we have too much respect for the firefighters that they want to come in and fight this. So really the idea is that once they come in, I can see through smoke, I can see through darkness, right? So like I can see through heat. I mean, and I know where I'm shooting. So what ends up happening, they come in and like normally they would contain this fire. They wouldn't even come in near it. And we're saving the business. They'll pull up next to us and basically just copycat our nozzle. And they put extra amounts. So you see that actually really help because it's now you actually have double the amount of spray. There's so many things that we're learning as we go that from an innovation perspective, it's starting to become real fun.
We have maybe another 10 or 15 minutes left here. What about the lithium ion batteries and possibly the F500? Because I've seen those guys talking about how they can actually control a burning lithium ion battery fire. Do you have any work on that?
So again, I don't. You can control lithium-ion battery fires. So we've been fighting fires. Like half the fires that we fought last year were lithium-ion battery fires. So I'll give you an example. And again, like this is sorry to go. Okay. So this was a scooter battery, right? It had like 14 different pouches, and you can see it starts five separate fires. So we're going
Wow.
to shoot all five of these. And again, we're looking at, we verify, we tell these guys to leave. Because again, every one of the, like even a vape has 2 gallons of toxic fumes come from just a vape battery. So just imagine what you get from all the other personal storage and personal electronics. Like you're talking about the BESS and the big side of the industrial side of the business, but a lot of this is scrap metal recycling, electronic recycling, hazard material recycling, and you're dealing with a lot of contamination, and a lot of that contamination causes fires, right? So again, as we go in, we're soaking all the material to ensure that the fire, and then we also have built-in fire watch, right? This is an example of an environmental facility that we're, that when we deal with an explosion, right? So like we're literally fighting that fire within seconds, 6 to 21 seconds. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it doesn't, but we are constantly fighting fires really early. And again, the more water we have, the better. But, this is like an outdoor facility. This is a chemical facility. So actually, this was these are all mislabeled chemicals. This one starts to react. We're calling their guys, and he's in a bunny suit. He's basically going to pull this out. Where literally a human being looks, verifies, actually sprays it, deal with any weather, whether it's indoor or outdoor. You're always dealing with drafts and other things that are going to play with the aim. But again, then you'll see we'll shoot it right on the nose. These guys come back, they pull it out, and now you don't have a catastrophic boom, 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 boom right down the pile. And again, this is the last one I'll show you. This is a lithium-ion battery, but this is how we deal with them, right? We cool the areas around them. So this is actually, we have both here. We actually have a F500 in this nozzle, and then we have a product called Fire that's actually a foam that's being used by the firefighters in their CAF system. So as you're going to see this go, and we're going to these are all button batteries. We're going to spray it and cool it, and we're going to stop it from basically building that chain effect.
Right.
Yeah, and I know it is a lot of stuff. So that's where as we're doing this, it's always different, and it's always a human being. We don't spray people. We've never accidentally shot, right? We've only had 2 catastrophic losses, or 2 losses overpower us in over 10 years. You're really only using this for high hazard or really dangerous like events that you don't want the firefighters to fight, right? You don't want that firefighter anywhere near that transformer when it explodes. The last thing, it's not worth someone's life, but it's definitely worth me spraying it when it's energized, because as long as I'm far enough away and I don't get the flash, I think we're okay. And then worst case, we're in the same boat we would have been anyways, and we're talking very small amount of money for some of these systems, especially the outdoor one.
We had a fire in a coal bunker in West Virginia. They were basically re-welding some liners in there, and the fire watch said he stayed for 30 minutes, but the fire started after he left. And the interesting thing was the flames go up through the top of the bunker, and the conveyor belt that drops the coal in burned. So it starts flopping down the gallery and creating a dust cloud on its way down. And then it ignites that dust cloud. Out through the gallery comes this big fireball that operates 20 sprinkler heads. And there was no soot, there was no damage, there was no heat up there, but there was this big flash. When the fire department got there, they had 90 firefighters show up.
Wow.
And they would not go in to fight it. They ordered our fire brigade to evacuate the plant. Plant manager said, if you're not going in, screw y'all. We're going to keep them there. We're going to protect our jobs, basically.
And honestly, it's not, everybody knows this, right? Like, your fire department's not supposed to be aggressive, right? Like, they're there to save lives, period. So there was actually a really good, like, a lot of the fire marshals are amazing when they start talking through what's happened and they do the anatomy of the fire. But once they get into it, the reality is if there's no person's life at risk, they are going to contain. And like, the one thing that's big, I'm an insurance play. We've had 2 catastrophic losses in 10 years. So the reality is that you put my system in because either the jurisdiction's requiring something, or your insurance company is telling you that you should do it from a risk mitigation perspective, or you're bringing it to the insurance company. So that's usually the ones that we end up doing. We ESFR like sprinkler heads, and they needed to basically reinforce the roof, and it was like $1.5 million to do that. And they put our system in lieu of it. So even though our system can be inefficient when it's always line of sight in a warehouse with like high ceilings or high racking, the reality is that it made more sense to use our stuff in lieu of it because of the situation. So like, we end up getting called in for a lot of really strange, weird ones that we're not cheaper per se, but we're definitely like, is it cheaper to put in our detection zones and nozzles versus run a 1.5-inch line and put in sprinkler heads that need to be at 181 degrees, 40 feet up in the air to actually trigger? And you're lucky with the one you were talking with the firebomb, right? Because it actually activated 95% of the time. And I know people get mad when I say this, but like, when we're fighting these, we're fighting them 15, 20 minutes earlier than when a sprinkler would come in. So like, I'm doing early detection, I'm doing initial extinguishment, containment, and final extinguishment, where most systems are only set for containment. And most firefighters come just to contain. Like,
Right.
they're protecting the public, and that's okay. We want them to live.
I would argue that your system, your approach is less fragile, less sensitive to issues. Sprinkler systems, if you flow too many heads, then you get little drips of water out of all the heads. If it was designed to flow 10 heads and you open 20, the system won't work. Whereas what you guys do is put enough water right where it matters versus hoping that we've put enough over 3,000 square feet to contain the fire. You want to get it when it first starts and keep it from becoming a 3,000 square foot fire.
Unless it's an explosion, and then you're just dealing with it, or you have a lot of accelerant or whatever. So I agree with you. Like, we're always trying to catch fires early, and we do a ton of preemptive maintenance, and like we look at conveyors shut down, we do e-stops and other things. So like we're always trying to utilize, like, I always say this, like, the good operator has less fires than a bad operator, but I mean, everybody, like, I'm only in there if there's an inherent risk of fire in the business, right? In the occupancy. So then really what we do is we focus on those 10 minutes between a breakdown and getting that fire professional, whether it's fire brigade, whether it's internal, whether external, whatever it is, getting that professional to come on scene. But then I also try to set the tripwires early in the process as possible, because I want to catch that fire when even if I look at it and it's sun hitting a piece of metal, I'm like, oh, it's not a fire, it's a hot spot, but it's not any danger. At least I know it was looked at. I do agree with you. I think the most amazing thing that I see is that, like, when we fight these, we basically, when we build the sprinkler flow test, we usually do 2 to 3 running simultaneously. And then if you have a sprinkler system, it'll default back to that at some point. Usually we don't get to that point because usually the fire's out or something. It has to be really bad for that to happen. And we've never had that happen yet. We've lost buildings where that didn't happen.
I was thinking that when you said explosion, we had problems with deluge systems that are big circles around transformers, 3 levels of sprinkler heads. And when the transformer fails, the one whole side wall can blow out, and that takes out your entire sprinkler system. So what we did at Dominion, and this was an interesting thing that happened, they were replacing a transformer that did not fail. The new transformer was a different size than the old transformer. And when they found out that the old sprinkler system that they took down that they wanted to reuse wasn't going to fit, and that they had to redesign another new sprinkler system for another 100 grand, they went back out in the scraps to see if they could get the old system. And then they found out it's not going to work. We found out that the AEP had this U-shaped system where they had 3-inch pipes with firefighter nozzles in the corners, and it was U-shaped so that when they ever had a transformer failure, they could just slide the old one out, slide a new one in that might be smaller, might be bigger, but they wouldn't have to take any of the piping down. And this piping, being 3-inch, was much more resistant to explosion. But still, we had 4 or 5 nozzles around. And that's why I was thinking that a Fire Rover would have taken the place of, if you have 3 GSUs or 3 couple auxiliary transformers and a GSU, then it seems the Fire Rover on each side is all you would really need to control all the fires on 3 or 4 transformers.
And I'm sorry, like, that's actually what I was saying, was like we actually end up having 3 different teams fighting 3 different fires from 3 different vantage points. So like you might be like, I understand that if you need like a dumb system, right? And again, dumb's not a bad word, right? It's just one of those. But to your point, you drop that in, and now you have 3 separate places where it's going to hit. And you think it's right. Do you want them to be actually going towards where the fire is? That's where you would have our system. And again, sometimes like the dollars don't make sense, right? Like sometimes it doesn't, because we are like a fire bodyguard. We're like your fire brigade that is there to on the front lines fighting your fires for you, and hopefully fighting the fires in replace of the firefighters, right? Or we at least give them the ability to come in.
That's what I see in refineries a lot. They have a lot of fires and they have big fire brigades, and they have a lot of money. They make a lot of money, but the problem is they don't make it forever. It's a cyclical industry, and sometimes there's booms and busts. And when they're having fires and they can't buy insurance, that's when they need the protection. I would think that they would be more willing to put a Fire Rover out there and expose that. What I saw in a solar plant last year was interesting. It was a robot infrared camera, and it wasn't there for fire detection. It was there just to look for hot spots under the panels. They do
Hmm.
drone flyovers for looking for hot spots above the panels, but then this little robot would just go up and down the rows and looking for hot spots. And we thought, why can't it have a fire extinguisher on it? If it finds a hot spot, why don't we do something about it?
Yeah, let it spray it. And that's where there's a company called Team Wildfire where he's put jet engines onto like small rovers. So that's what. And then he created one called the Barracuda. It's a guy named Steve Wolf, but he created one called the Barracuda that uses a full size jet engine and will basically put out wildfires. It's crazy stuff. Again, I think from an innovation perspective, the most important thing, we need more innovation, right? We need to be like pushing the needle on this stuff. And again, the hardest part is like, how do I go now convince all the fire lawyers, right? The fire engineers, God love them. But at the end of the day, like I need them to all understand and say, okay, I embrace it. And you're always working with the local guys. And sometimes you get pushback on new stuff, right? So you got to push through to give them no reason to ever to say no.
So I'm going to ask you about the next evolution for Fire Rover, but I want to tell you something about what I've done with AI. And I've got a video on my channel that talks about energy risk engineering applications for AI. But we had an insurance company engineer out in a warehouse looking at IBCs full of oil stacked, and he took pictures of them. And he went and took pictures of the hydraulic nameplates on the sprinkler risers, and he sent these pictures to his corporate fire protection engineer asking the question, will these sprinkler systems control a fire involving these stacked totes full of oil?
Right.
And he copied me on the picture, so I put him into ChatGPT and it said no. And it gave me the code references and said, and this is just from the pictures, right? It looked at the numbers on the hydraulics. It went out and researched NFPA 13. It told us what the density we needed. It says you don't have enough water, you could add foam. It gave us suggestions. It said, be careful if you do increase it to the zero point 0.6 GPM of water that it's going to need, because then you're going to have to worry about drainage and control of runoff. That's something I would think that Fire Rover isn't going to have the same kind of runoff because you're focusing that water and you're only flowing it as long as you need to, whereas the sprinkler systems run on and on.
I'm actually fit for purpose, right? The reality is that when we're spraying, so think like a hanger, right? You could put a 30,000 gallon deluge system, or you could put an R system. And if you have a heptane fire, I can fog spray onto it, right? And call the fire department or get hazmat there to clean it up as fast as possible. But I'm also not going to be spraying anywhere near it, right? Because I don't want to be adding to it. I could put any sort of, like you said, F500 or some other product as well. And then if there's a lithium-ion battery fire in one of the power tools that they're working on over in the back, I can spray that with a straight stream, right? I can literally react the way you need to. And the hardest thing is this, like I love AI, right? But it's like, it's not going to take away 100%. It takes away 30%, right? So it defeats the blank page, which I think is amazing. But like the reality is FM just approved us as the first smart monitor with human beings. They are not ready to start to approve like all this stuff. And again, then you also have to say, okay, like when are you going to have a robot that can make all those decisions, can know what to spray, what not to spray, what collateral assets to hit, what not to hit, who to call, when to call them, make sure they're there, deal with the fact that they're not answering their phone, it's 4 a.m, all these things. Like our guys have ice in their veins. They're used to this all the time because this is all they do, the condition for it. So the reality that we can't get away from that human being because number one, I don't think AI is there yet, especially when you're dealing with inherent risk of fire and you're dealing with active areas. It's just it almost becomes too much for this type of system. You can have automated systems in some things where it'll probably make sense and use AI, and if no one's walking through it, and there's no reason why it couldn't work for certain types of things.
Yeah. Okay. Where else can we find information about Fire Rover, case studies, and things like that? Where can the viewers follow you?
For me, they can follow me on LinkedIn, which is probably the best thing. But I also have a fire safety newsletter that has 11,500 subscribers. And then I also have a newsletter that I send out that has 120,000 subscribers. So I write an annual report, which is the waste and recycling. This year was We Are at War with Vapes. It was the waste and recycling facility fires in the US and Canada. I've been doing that research and consolidating it for its publicly reported fires. It's being used in a lot of the EPR, but so I just published that in March, and then I do a monthly article in Waste 360 as well. So there's plenty of information and Fire Rover's YouTube channel and all the other stuff that we have. But yeah, feel free. It's one of those things that my fire safety report, I try to do what you do, and I'm more than happy to have you as part of it. But this is some of the podcasts we're doing, different markets and that type of thing. I'm really trying to get the word out that I'm ready to bring in partners because the partners are the guys who are designing these and building these. So again, I've spent 10 years and I'm always talking to fire engineers. We're going to NFPA and like I know a ton of them. So I think hopefully I know enough of them now that I'm not just coming and saying, hey, we're ready. Like most of them know I've been saying it for 8 years that we're getting ready. So I'm
Yeah.
pretty excited and the prospects are good. And honestly, we need to innovate in this country, period. I don't care what side you are. We're capitalists. You have to innovate or we'll be left behind.
Awesome. I think that the more people know about the system and realize that it's this far along and that it's got humans watching over it, that it's got, you put just enough water where you need it, that you've already dealt with lithium ion battery fires. You've got so many things going that I think we just need to get the word out better. And hopefully that's what this little bit of a podcast will do. And
No, it's great. Listen, your little bit of a podcast with 1,000 folks are probably very influential folks. And I mean, we need really good people. And I'll tell you, in fire, it's almost good sometimes there's not too much innovation. You know what I'm saying?
because it
Like,
is
you
still
don't
just
want fire
e-fuel and
protection to
oxygen.
break. You don't even know, but you still have to have like I'm still like understand and empathize with the fact that like it has to work. So the least complex it is, the better. But then I don't understand how you have 7 or 10 different partners building a system that everybody crosses their fingers and says, you're for us, we basically say, okay, if this is our thing, we own it. If it goes wrong, it's all our fault. And insurance guys, hopefully that gives you a little bit of confidence. So I do think it's a little different, but at the end of the day, I think we're all trying to fight the same fight.
I would think I was out on an offshore platform one time and I went out
Those are
there with an
great. Was it
open
crazy?
mind. Yes. And I was talking to them about the way things were done onshore, not to tell them how to do it, but just to compare how they did it versus how others did it. And I asked them how they tested their fire pumps. And onshore, once a week, they start up with no flow. Once a year, they do a performance test to see what the capacity of the pump is. And all these guys did was every month they would turn their pumps on and spray water across the platform. And I said, you're actually flowing water 12 times a year instead of once. That's even better than onshore, but you're not measuring the capacity or the pressure. So how do you know you have enough water pressure? And the operator said, if we can reach the other side of the platform, we have enough water pressure.
Well, and
You don't
that
need
is
gas.
a lot of times it gets down to brass tacks. And you listen, I get it. I'm not offshore, so I think there's different rules that apply. But I also could tell you that I can spray a fire offshore so that you don't have to be there, right? I could be your eyes and ears there in a lot of these facilities, like I don't want to say which ones, but they're becoming dark, right? Like they're running their operations in the complete dark. When that happens, you still want to have eyes and ears, and you especially want to have thermal eyes, right? Yeah, no, I definitely think we're at an exciting time and I appreciate it. Like guys like you, like I need your brain power thinking about how our system works and where it should go. Because that's the reality of all this is that I've been doing this for 10 years. I've learned as much as I can, but I always have to bring in experts. I don't know if you guys know Andy Lynch. I work with a ton of former either Jensen Hughes guys and a lot of those because I need all of your opinions and I need you guys stopping us when we need to and holding us accountable.
And a lot of the guys that I talk to on my channel have come from chemical engineering or electrical engineering or mechanical, and they want to be risk engineers. So that's what my channel focuses on is training them how to look at risk and manage it. And they're going to be interested in, they're out there doing loss control evaluations in facilities and industrial energy facilities. So if they have more tools to solve the problem, then it's going to be a much easier job. And they'll be the heroes for bringing in this new solution that a lot of these companies have fought for years trying to deal with pain in the neck fires they don't know how to handle. And it seems like you guys have a really good solution that has come of age and it's ready to spread the word. That's what we're going to
Well,
do.
and I will say this, we're protecting conservatively for our largest customer over $5 billion worth of their property, plant, and equipment. And we're doing it, it's over 100 and something facilities because of eating, but it's at a rate that's 5% of what the premium would be. So those guys who are self-insuring their risk, which is a lot of, right? That's the biggest thing. And then insurance companies do take, but I had one company where their leadership put a co-op in, and then they started investing in our system, right? So again, it is definitely an insurance and a risk mitigation play. So there's always that. I'm only as good as my record, but I also share all those details. And I have my dashboards always. I share that all the time. And it's also in my annual report and everything. A
Uh,
lot of guys want to see that.
I'll put in a shameless plug for you to go watch a video on my channel about annual cost of risk because I had to put together a financial model for the treasurer at Dominion to show him that we were not buying insurance for business interruption and that you weren't going to save money by installing a sprinkler system. The insurance company had no premium to cut because you weren't paying a premium. But yet we did have an annual cost of risk. It was the likelihood that we were going to have this underturbine fire, the consequence of having to start up an oil plant when we burned up a coal or nuclear plant, and the difference in that replacement fuel. So I put together this model, and he said, "How much money do you want?" And I said, $1 million. He said, "You should take 10." No,
That's it.
no, give me
That's my
two.
Accenture days, right? You're like, hey, I just saved you $1 billion. They're like, show me where it is.
Yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
again, not that I don't love the consulting, but yeah, no, listen, I think it's great. I look forward to learning more. And the same thing. This is where I feel like I'm at the starting point. So hopefully there's some projects we can work on, and definitely if it's Fire Rover, that'd be great.
I hope generate a bunch of
Let's hope it
comments.
makes sense.
We'll get people down in the comments section asking more questions, and then we can follow up. And I'll post your contact info down there in the description of the video. I'll put some websites on the screen here in the right places. And then again, promote it through LinkedIn because I'm pretty active on LinkedIn too.
No, it sounds
So
good. And honestly, if anyone has any ideas or wants to see this be a podcast that we come on like once a month, I'm more than happy to do it. Just we need to have a lot of votes down there like saying yes. But anyways, just
sure.
kidding. All
And,
right.
and maybe periodically you can come in and just share some of the successes that you've had.
100%. Listen, I think this is, you know me. It's like one of those things where there are people out there that are interested in I always call it copycat, right? Because so I'm a part of a bunch of co-working spaces like called Cohatch, but it's always we'll have entrepreneurs that come in, and really they just see what other people are doing. And a lot of times it sparks their ideas. This is always can't stop learning.